John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN. This guy's got a Cowboy shirt on. He's got some nerve.
I'll tell you
Sports
what.
Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.
Got a ring,
John is
too.
with us, and he is, of course, our Eagles insider for 97.3 ESPN.com. As the Eagles off today, practiced yesterday at the stadium, but a lot happening around this team. They've made a couple of some signings. So let's get the latest on the Birds with 97.3 ESPN.com's John McMullen. What's up, Johnny?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
You got it, and it's been a interesting week. First week of training camp down. The full team came in on Thursday. They had the open practice on Sunday, and as you wrote at 97.3 ESPN.com during yesterday's open practice, the Eagles' offense dominates the defense again. So a lot of these new toys in the at least early stages seem to be paying off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little concerned because I don't know how to take it. I mean, the wide receivers are much improved. I think it's fair to say that. But the cornerbacks are struggling, and that's the bigger concern because they're getting beaten like a drum really on 2 consecutive days in practice. And if you go back to Saturday, I think Carson Wentz was 25 of 25. In 7-on-7 drills. Now,
that can't be a concern.
Well, it's not a concern from Carson's standpoint, but it's going to get tougher. You understand 7-on-7 drills are scripted. The ball is supposed to be completed most of the time, but 25 out of 25 is absurd. And, you know, they followed it up on Sunday, and they did one-on-one drills between the receivers and the defensive backs for the first time, and it wasn't pretty from Jim Schwartz's standpoint. And we've talked about it all off season about the concerns about the cornerback position, and that's only grown over the past week.
John, how about the cornerback move that they made today? It's a minor roster move, but what was the move that they made today to bring in a new cornerback?
Well, that's a very minor move. Randall Goforth, who's an undrafted free agent, he tore his ACL on Friday. And this is the type of time of year where you need bodies at that particular position. So it's no surprise that they brought in another cornerback. But it's just a back-end roster move. It's certainly not someone who is going to be significant or have a chance to make this team. It's sort of just a camp body that you need because of the ACL injury. And as we've talked from the beginning, I mean, this is, you know, the names you know, Jalen Mills, Patrick Robinson, Ron Brooks, C.J. Smith, Rasul Douglas, Aaron Grimes. Those are the guys you have to count on. And I'm not sure you can. So that's going to be the main storyline all summer is are these guys improving or do the Eagles need to go outside the organization to try to do something?
John, as Pete mentioned about the corner, maybe he's not a guy that they're looking to really help out on the field, but any scuttlebutt on that? Have you heard anything as you've been walking through those walls of, all right, we've seen enough. We might not need to start making some phone calls here.
Well, I think they might be doing that today after what they saw yesterday. And obviously the media is not there today, so they can be a little more relaxed. But I do think, you know, when Jim Schwartz talks later in the week, he's going to be asked a number of questions about what's going on. And, you know, Jim's not the kind of guy who kind of blows smoke. So you've heard from his comments earlier when he spoke, and he'll talk about certain positions. They have obvious answers. Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Malcolm Jenkins, the safeties, Rodney McLeod, Jordan Hicks. You know these guys can play. They're stalwarts on this defense. When he talks about the corners, he says, we got to keep an open mind. We'll have to see, things like that. Because he knows, he understands he's up against it, and these guys got to improve quickly, or it's going to be an issue.
John McMullen with us, our Eagles insider on 97.3 ESPN. John, just to go back to the corner position again, not to harp on them too much, but could you spin that the other way in that they're going up against an All-Pro in Alshon Jeffrey, and that if they can even hang with him a little, then that maybe proves well for the quality of competition they go up, or is it more the alarm bells for you because of how it's looked so far?
Yeah, it's the other guys. It's not Alshon. I mean, I would never be concerned if Alshon Jeffrey was beating the corners, because he is that good, and that's not really an issue. I expect him to excel. But when, yesterday, for instance, David Watford looked like a world beater, and we talked about the improvement of Nelson Aguilar. He looked like an all-pro receiver out there, and look, we've seen him play enough to know that's probably not going to be the scenario when the regular season starts. Marcus Johnson has probably been Mr. NovaCare, the star of the camp, in that, guy who's not all that well known that steps up, and he's been just beating people time and time again. So, yeah, you're not concerned if Alshon Jeffrey beats people, but when lower receivers who are not even supposed to make this 53-man roster, in the case of Watford, start making plays, well, you got to be concerned.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about. Like Alshon Jeffrey against Jalen Mills, if he gets the better of him, hey, maybe no harm, no foul, because that's a number one going up against a number one, like you said, in a setting that's designed to have the football be caught, and it's sort of I don't want to call it laissez-faire, but it's a little bit hands-off. You're not trying to hurt anybody out there. What are some of the other concerns, though, that you saw? Was there anything else concerning that stood out at the open practice to you?
No, I think everybody's so focused on the cornerback position, and I think this team is pretty solid everywhere else. I mean, I do have a little bit of concern with the trade of Alan Barbre, because I think, I think the game day swing tackle is more important than people think it is, and that was the role he was going to fulfill. And all of a sudden you have to go to Vaitai or Dylan Gordon, and neither has played the other position. Gordon is always lined up at left tackle, hasn't gotten reps at right tackle. Vaitai was always at right tackle, hadn't gotten reps at left tackle. Now, Vaitai started on Saturday to finally swing over because he's got to get used to playing both positions. So that, to me, is a little bit of a concern, but you're talking about backup players. And every team in this league is going to have depth issues. The Eagles are no different. But when you start talking about starters and you're not confident in starters, that's where you start to become concerned. And really, if I look at this team up and down, you can nitpick and you can say certain guys have to perform at this level. But the only real position you have a dramatic concern over, and the fact that you just don't know if they can perform at an acceptable NFL level, that's cornerback.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. I wasn't here last week, so I wanted to get more take on the Alan Barbre release, or trade, I guess it turned. First it was a release, then he ends up getting traded.
Yeah, they got a piece for him, 7th rounders.
Yeah, they get a late draft choice for him. But as you mentioned, was this to kind of appease him? Was it because they like Warmack? I mean, does that say something about Vaitai? Can you give me a little bit more in terms of their thinking? When you have a veteran guy that can fill the pieces like that, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of money. I was a little surprised when I saw your text or your tweet that first it was a release and then take that back, he got traded. I was a little surprised by that, even if he's not the starter. I mean, he seemed like a guy that, especially with the injuries that have happened on this team at that position the last couple of years, that you would want around.
Yeah, and the Eagles probably would have liked to keep him around, but it was pretty clear he was going to be very, very unhappy. And he views himself as a starter in this league, and he's probably right. He probably is going to go in to Denver and own a star and win a starting job. I mean, he's good enough to play in this league, and I think from his standpoint, he thinks he's still better than Isaac Seumalo at this point, and I don't necessarily disagree with him there. So I think it was more of the Eagles sat him down, explained what they wanted to do, and that was going to be Seumalo was going to be the starter, and Allen was going to be the swing tackle. He wasn't happy. He made it clear he wasn't happy. And rather than have a guy like that in the locker room who is going to not be thrilled with his role, they decided to move on. Because realize he's 33 years old, and this was the last year of his contract. So this was going to be his last season in Philadelphia no matter what. So the Eagles just sped up that process, and they're going with a young player that they think has a higher ceiling and who's going to be around for a long time. But as that part of it makes sense, the part of it that hurts, as I said, now all of a sudden that depth we talked about in the offseason on the offensive line, still pretty significant on the interior, but you start to question it at tackle on the outside. If something happened to Jason Peters or Lane Johnson, all of a sudden the dominoes are going to start to fall. And Vaitai or Dylan Gordon or Matt Tobin, they're not as good as Alan Barbre.
John, one of the positions we've talked to you about before is linebacker, and maybe they don't have a lot of depth at linebacker either. Now, Friday I was off, but I know that on Friday the news came out that Michael Kendrick says that he wants to be traded. And what I think first and foremost when I see a headline like that is disgruntled employee, right? Not too thrilled with where his status is, but he really is kind of powerless, right, John?
Yeah, he is powerless. I mean, he signed the contract, and he admitted that. And to his credit, he said, look, I got to make the best of my situation. But it is. I mean, he has a very, very hefty contract for a guy who played 27% of the snaps last season. So the Eagles value him as a player, but because of the nature of the NFL and the fact that everybody plays 11 personnel with 3 receivers, the fact of the matter is your third linebacker isn't going to be on the field all that much. And the real issue with Michael is he's fallen behind Nigel Bradham. So when you have Hicks and Bradham on the field, he's not going to get a lot of opportunities. And he, like Alan Barbre, thinks he's a starting level player in this league, and that's why he asked to be traded. The Eagles would probably like to trade him as well, but that salary kind of hampers people taking him on, and we'll see how it sort of shakes out. But there's always, we've talked about it, and now we've said I got to go back to cornerback again. I mean, if you're going to find a way to improve at that position, trade is one of the ways. And as Michael Kendrick said, a trade, hey, it's never dead. It's always on the table. It can always be revitalized and talked about again. And he's one of those guys that if you need to move somebody to improve at a different position, he would be at the top of the list.
Yeah, you talked about Hicks and Bradham as the 2 starters there and the established guys, but how many linebackers are you looking at as you project a roster? How many guys would they keep? And therefore, in that case, you know, how expendable is that linebacker position? Can you use a Michael Kendricks as a piece to get a cornerback? Those kind of thought process.
Well, they probably can in his situation because they also would like a little bit of the salary cap relief, but they're still going to keep most likely 6 linebackers because even though only 2 are on the base defense, those are kind of the guys who populate your special teams units, your coverage units, and those are very, very important pieces of the puzzle for Dave Phipps. So you have to add that into the equation. So guys like Joe Walker and Camus, Grugier, Hill, players like that, Najee Good, they're probably gonna make this football team because of their special teams acumen, on top of the fact that they're backup linebackers.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles have the day off today. They're getting the rest today, but they've got their 3 scheduled live hitting days coming up the next couple of days. Doug will talk tomorrow. But in this first week, I know a lot of people always look at the rookies. I've heard, now again, I've been off, so I've kind of been a little disconnected, but I've heard good things about Derek Barnett. It seems that, you know, a lot of positive reviews on the first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's excited about Derek Barnett. He's, starting off slowly. He's on the second team. Vinny Curry is with the first team at right defensive end. Everybody, dating back to the offseason, they talked about his bend around the edge. Lane Johnson compared it to Von Miller. That tells you how good that aspect of his game is. But Jim Schwartz, was very, very cautious, and he said, look, in this league, you have to develop a counter move, and that's what the Eagles are trying to teach him right now, because a lot of it is just trying to get around the edge with his quickness and his first step. And Jim loves the baseball references, Jim Schwartz, and, he compares it to a fastball. You might get one by a great hitter every once in a while, but they're going to catch up to you really, really quickly. And if you think about the left tackles in this division, specifically Trent Williams and Teron Smith, if you go speed rush on those guys, they're just going to eat you for lunch. It's going to be difficult. So right now, he's got to develop that counter move, as every NFL pass rusher has to do, and it's no surprise. It's all rookies kind of go through that transition.
Yeah, John, it's good to see, but hear it too, that he's been out there working. I guess it helps going up against Jason Peters, getting a chance to work with him.
Yeah, it does. That's what the left tackles in this division are unbelievable, except for the Giants, who have Eric Flowers. But if you say, I would say Trent Williams is the best left tackle in football. Smith is number 2, and Peters is probably 5. So 3 of the 5 best left tackles in football are in the same division. And Barnett gets to practice against one of them. And he has been working with them after practice about that very thing I spoke of, the counter move. And to have a 35-year-old guy who's seen literally every pass rush move there is, yeah, that's a really valuable tool to go to.
John McMullen with us, our Eagles insider for 97.3 ESPN. So, John, I want to loop back to that open practice and what we were talking about when you first came on. I saw the pictures with Lane Johnson wearing a wig, a.k.a. the trick that Curly Neal used to use, or maybe Mike Schmidt did one time to sort of bond with himself or bond with the teammates and the fans and sort of connect. Do you think that's the way to go? Have they stumbled onto this? Is this open practice the way to go, or do you miss the days of Lehigh?
No, I certainly don't. I don't miss them because I don't have to make that drive. But I understand the fans. This is the way the NFL's going, though. And ever since 2011, when training camp was scaled back, there's no need to go away. There's just not enough practices. There's no two-a-days. There's not enough to do during the day. And the Eagles do a good job, getting season ticket holders in for the practices at NovaCare, and obviously they have the 2 open practices. And I think 2/3 of the league stays home now for training camp. And it continues to be that every year. It's getting closer to more and more. And as more teams build the first-class training facilities, the Cowboys just built theirs in Frisco. They're probably eventually going to go back there. The Vikings have been in Mankato for 52 years, guys, and they're going to their new practice facility, which will be completed by next year. So they'll be leaving Mankato and going to Eagan, Minnesota. More and more teams are doing it. Eventually, everybody's going to do it unless they go back to the old format, and I don't see that ever happening.
John, I woke up this morning, I saw a video. You wrote about it at FanRag Sports NFL about that CTA case. I saw a video this morning. It was pretty disturbing. Like, I get it, these guys, when the season's on and we see the hits. But I don't know if you saw the Brian Price video of him just walking down the street and running through 2 glass doors and then just laying on the ground. He says he doesn't remember any of it, and just, man, that, for some reason, that video really struck me. It really was like a difference, like a changer, a mind changer, I guess, if you will. That CTE, you wrote about it saying it was a flawed headline shaded a flawed study. The numbers that came out last week, I know a lot of people have been talking about, but that video, for some reason, I don't know if you saw it. Did you see that video?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, hey, I've always been, what I was trying to do was just point out how bad the headlines were. And I was in the Eagles locker room that day where so many people asked them questions. And one reporter who I have a lot of respect for said, look around, 99% of the people in this locker room are going to have CTE. How do you feel about that? And that's just failure to understand the study and what it was. Basically, you're talking about people who had issues, cognitive issues, serious, committed suicide, up to that level of issues. And those are the only brains they study. Because, let's be honest, far more NFL players die of natural causes. And if you die of natural causes, well, I got news for you. Your family is not going to donate your brain tissue to Boston University. So to run that headline, 99% of NFL players that's just wrong. And I think you're creating a generation of players who don't have the time or the wherewithal or whatever to actually sit down and read sort of a mundane study like that and understand the flaws in it. And they think, when they turn 50 years old, and as we all get older and we maybe start to forget things a few more, we forget where our car keys are, whatever, what have you. They automatically default to I have CTE. And that to me is incredibly, incredibly dangerous because it could create so many more problems. Depression. And all of a sudden, it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy of an ex-NFL player sitting there, as I said, at 55 years old, and he gets a headache or he gets irritable and has an argument for his wife, and he starts to think, is this going to happen to me? Am I going to go, run through, as you said with Brian Price, run through doors? Am I going to commit suicide? I don't like the way it's been framed in the media, and that's what I wrote about.
Check that piece out. John has it at JF McMullen on Twitter, FanRag Sports NFL. Eagles off today, but back in action the next couple days, live hitting. We'll have all the latest at 4:05 on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. All right, John, take care, my friend.
Hey, thank you, guys.